There are many ways to kill someone. Yeah, you could strangle them, shoot them, stab them, poison them, or drown them. Today, we're speaking about forensic science and helping you with some murder vocabulary so that you can understand it better. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And I'm Craig.
And with about 47.5 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it up to the next level. How are things, Craig?
Things are pretty good, Reza. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, I must say. I'm doing very well. Considering the topic for today, I'm just happy to be alive.
Me too. It's great to be alive. Before we get into the vocabulary of forensic science, a quick hello to new listener Francesco Peralta from Nicaragua, who has been working on his fluency and has a suggestion for you, and that is to use Google Voice's recognition tool when you send texts or emails. And I think that's a very good idea. If you have Google Voice on your mobile phone, and most people with an Android phone have that, or if you have an iPhone, use Siri and use it to dictate your emails and your texts and make notes. It's very good practice for your fluency.
Yes, your pronunciation will have to be pretty good. Not perfect, but good so that it recognizes you. So that's good practice. Apparently, Google's tool and other similar tools don't recognize about 30% of all Scottish people.
Really?
Who are native English speakers. So whenever somebody goes, right, pal, get me the flights to Glasgow, or something like that, like, get me the flights to Glasgow, Google Voice tool doesn't recognize it. But if you say, I want a flight to Glasgow, maybe it recognizes you. So it must be very frustrating for a lot of Scottish people.
Anyway, why don't you try it? I think it's very good practice. Or you could record your voice on your phone and listen back to your voice. So listen when you've recorded your voice and try to improve your fluency. Try to stop saying between words. And if you want to work on that, we did produce a special episode speaking about those disfluencies and verbal crutches that people say, like, you know, all the time, and So to improve your fluency, go to episode 172, inglespodcast.com/172.
We've got an email from Anya Danielle, who's originally from Mexico and now living in Chiswick, London. And she's probably listening to this while walking her baby and dog around Chiswick. She's successfully used the meetup.com website and managed to get a band 7, that's 7 out of 9, in IELTS test. Congratulations, well done, Anya.
Yeah, well done.
So Anya's doing a master's in forensic science, and it's her idea. She asked if we can speak about it a bit. She wrote this: I would like to suggest a podcast about forensic science, criminal forensics, types of evidence, crime scene, toxicology, alibi, DNA analysis, laboratory, and stuff like that. It would help me a lot, and I think it would be interesting.
Well, we agree, Anya. So we're going to speak a little about vocabulary. Now, we're not going to go very deep into the technical vocabulary of forensic science. If you are studying that or you would like to learn a little more, just Google forensic science vocabulary. We don't want to make it too heavy for people who are not particularly interested, but we are going to give a general overview, a general summary of the types of common words that you would connect with this topic of forensic science. The scientific procedures used to solve crimes is the definition of forensic science. What's the first expression, Reza?
Well, probably the most important thing of all is the crime scene. Where did it happen? The crime scene. There could be a body, traces of blood, and other objects at the crime scene. That's SCENE, scene.
I would recommend and strongly suggest not to go camping in the countryside. Because have you noticed that when there is a crime scene, people always die in a tent?
Oh, very, very good, Gary. Very good. Very good.
Of course, they don't die in a tent, but the police do tend to put a tent around the body while they are checking for forensics at the scene of the crime, at the crime scene.
And who would you think of, Craig, to be in that tent first, having a look at the body?
Well, before the crime scene gets contaminated with too many people and other things, they would send in a pathologist, a doctor who examines dead bodies to find out the cause of death. And from the noun pathologist, we have the word pathological. What's a pathological liar?
Well, that's a different use. In that collocation, pathological liar, it's someone who just has to lie. They can't stop lying. They lie about everything. They're a pathological liar. There's another word which I knew, but I must admit I checked my information on internet just to make sure. I thought, what's the difference between a pathologist and a coroner? Because they seem more or less the same to me. Well, I discovered that a coroner, that's CORONER, is also a person who identifies dead bodies and tries to find out the cause of death. I already knew that. However, here's the difference. Sometimes a coroner is a trained forensic pathologist, depending on the country, but sometimes not. So it depends on every country or even different parts of a country. Some coroners are trained medical experts, but some are not. Some just go and identify the body and find out what happened. So a coroner is not exactly the same as a pathologist, but sometimes it's a coroner or sometimes it's a pathologist who goes to the crime scene. It depends.
So if it's not a trained forensic pathologist, then the person would not be specifically looking for scientific clues
Exactly.
from the body or in the murder scene.
Exactly. And that would be a coroner. Yeah.
Right. So one way of examining the body to find out why the person died, or we say the cause of death, to discover cause of death, is to do or perform an autopsy, AUTOPSY, an autopsy, or a post-mortem examination. Post, of course, means after. We have the expression postnatal, after birth, or postmodernism when you speak about art. Post-mortem, mortem, death, after death, an autopsy.
I guess pathologists are looking for physical evidence. So they're looking at things like fingerprints, huellas, dactiles, footprints, huellas, but from your feet, hairs, etc. Can you think of any other physical evidence they might be looking for?
Well, if you see hairs from people or pieces of skin, perhaps, that have fallen, inside that they can discover DNA, which is the substance that carries genetic information. I think the abbreviation is in a different order in Spanish, isn't it? DNA.
Yes, ADN.
Yeah, ADN, which apparently is an abbreviation of deoxyribonucleic acid.
But nobody ever says that. We all just say DNA.
Yeah, I'm sure Anya knows the pronunciation. Toxicology. Toxicology is a branch of science that's concerned with poisons, with the nature of poisons, the effects that poisons have on people, detecting the poisons. Anything to do with poisons is toxology. Toxology. What's ballistics?
Ballistics. Well, ballistics with an S, it's always with an S if you're talking about the noun. So the study of ballistics is the study of motion, dynamics, angular movement, angles, and above all, the effects of projectile units. So bullets, balas, missiles, bombs, like how and where did they explode? what angles did they move in, what damage did they cause. All of that is ballistics. And an expert in ballistics, a ballistics expert, can possibly tell you quite a lot about a murderer just from looking at the bullets or the holes where the bullets have been.
And every bullet, I think, has its own very distinctive fingerprint. Every bullet is different. The way it leaves the gun, there's a definite way to identify different bullets. Let's look at some collocations for a second. To kill, and the person who kills is a killer. And to murder, and the person who murders is a murderer. Murderer.
The crime they commit is murder. So you commit a crime. So you can commit murder, you can commit theft, you can commit a crime.
You can commit adultery if you have sex outside your marriage. Commit adultery. So commit, the collocation with those words, murder, suicide.
Yes, exactly. Suicide. Is it a crime? Well,
how many years would you go to prison for if you committed suicide?
Yeah. They can do what they like. You're not really going to regret it, are you?
Maybe it's a crime against God, which is why
that's the thing, isn't it?
Has that collocation.
Certainly in the Catholic Church, it's considered a sin. You should not commit suicide. Mm-hmm. And in fact, years ago, I don't know if this has changed, but years ago, they didn't bury people who committed suicide along with everybody else. They put them in a separate part of the cemetery.
Yeah.
Strange, but true. I don't know if that's changed. Would be interested to know if anybody can solve that mystery for us. Is suicide still considered a crime, a sin by the Catholic Church? Getting back to a much more common type of crime, that is to shoot someone. That's S-H-O-O-T. You shoot someone with a gun. And if you do that, you could be called a shooter, but it's more common to say a gunman or a gunwoman, the person who shot the gun.
And if you use a knife to commit your murder, your crime, the verb is to stab someone, S-T-A-B, apuñalar. So the man was stabbed to death in the street.
A horrible way to kill someone, I imagine, would be to strangle, S-T-R-A-N-G-L-E. And a person who does that, a criminal who does that, the word criminal in English can be a noun, a person who commits a crime. That criminal is a strangler. So that's to kill by choking. C-H-O-K-E is to choke. When you put your hands or some kind of object around someone's throat so that they cannot breathe, you are a strangler. Now, in general, I don't like killers, but I do like the Stranglers, the music group, I must say. Do you remember the Stranglers?
Yeah, I remember Golden Brown.
Yeah, golden brown, takes to like sun, golden brown, they might. But we're talking about a music group. So we'd be interested to know if any of you out there like the Stranglers. I was a big fan of a pop group, more like a punk rock group, actually.
Yeah,
called
they came out of the punk era, yeah. Golden Brown, of course, about heroin, which is another way you could die or commit suicide by overdose. Another way to kill someone through lack of air is to suffocate. S-U-F-F-O-C-A-T-E. To suffocate, asphyxiar. So perhaps you'd use a pillow or maybe a plastic bag so that the person does not have enough air and they cannot breathe. So that's another way to murder, to suffocate someone. And the noun is suffocation. So the cause of death could be suffocation.
Another way to die or to kill someone is to drown. I say die or kill someone because you can drown on your own. So in that case, it wouldn't be a murder. You could just be unlucky and you die in water. So you could say the man drowned. But also it can be used whenever one person kills another person. For example, the killer drowned the victim. So I guess in Spanish, the difference would be between being reflexive or not. So ahogar or ahogarse. So you can just drown without being killed, or a person can drown you. That must be a horrible way to die.
Yeah, I think so too. Your lungs would fill up with water and there'd be panic. It'd be horrible. We mentioned overdosing on drugs or heroin before. You could also poison someone. Poison, envenenar. So you give somebody something that kills them, and then the person is a poisoner. So poison is the verb, and poisoner, the person who commits the crime.
We quite often use this word poison, noun or verb, a poison, to poison, in a metaphoric sense, don't we? It's like, imagine there's a person who always causes trouble. Let's call him Brian. And people say, oh, stay away from Brian. He's poisonous. Or he's poison. Oh, anything he touches, don't get involved with him. Don't become friends with Brian. He's poisonous.
He poisons the air with his negativity, you could say. Another crime that forensic scientists provide very useful evidence for is rape. To rape, R-A-P-E, is violar. And the criminal, the person who rapes, is a rapist. So obviously with rape, there are clues that the forensic scientists can use to catch the criminal.
Don't confuse a rapist, un violador, someone who commits a sexual crime, with a rapper, R-A-P-P-E-R. A rapper is un rapper in Spanish, someone who sings rap music. So the musician, a rapper, and the sexual criminal, a rapist.
Yeah, you could get into trouble if you confuse those. You often hear the abbreviation TOD when we speak about forensic medicine. TOD, time of death, the exact time or the estimated time that the person died, time of death.
Yes, it's the sort of thing you see in films. I don't know if it happens in real life, I guess so. But whenever a doctor knows that someone's going to die or they're treating them and they die, they call time of death. So they look at their watch and they say, shall we call time of death? And then they say the time so that everybody agrees. 12:03, okay.
Yeah, you see that in hospitals too, if they're trying to revive someone or bring them back to life, and then they stop trying, the person dies, and the doctor says, okay, we'll call time of death, and then they say the time and they write it down.
Craig, some chocolate biscuits were stolen from this room 20 minutes ago. Was it you?
No. 20 minutes ago, I was in the bathroom. I have an alibi.
Okay, it couldn't be Craig. It's impossible then.
Nope. An alibi is coartada in Spanish. So I could not have done the crime because I was in another place. I have an alibi.
And if there's absolutely no way that I can find a fault in his alibi, a typical collocation is an airtight alibi. Airtight. So it's like something in a vacuum. No air can get in. There's no way he's going to get into trouble. It's airtight. Perfect alibi.
We've got some recommended TV series for you if you're interested in this kind of thing, or maybe even like Anya, you're studying forensic science. There are several TV series that will help you with your English and with this vocabulary. You may know the series Bones, B-O-N-E-S. There's also CSI, a very popular crime drama. There's CSI New York, CSI Las Vegas. I think there's another CSI somewhere. Do you watch these shows, Reza?
I don't follow them, no. I occasionally watch 5 or 10 minutes when there's an interesting crime scene, but I'm not a regular viewer.
Me neither. Oh, CSI Miami, that's the other one. Yeah. There's also one out of the UK called Silent Witness, and that's very good. It's a bit slower. It's not as Hollywoodish as the other American series. In Spanish, it's Testigo Mudo. Links to all of these shows are on the website at inglespodcast.com/251 if you're interested. And I'll mention one more, The Mentalist. Not exactly strictly forensic science. It's more psychological crime solving, but also a very good series. Can you think of any, Reza, to recommend?
Well, there's one that I like, which is strange. It's more or less factual, but they change the names because they don't want to get into legal trouble or they don't want to embarrass people. It's called 1,000 Ways to Die.
So is it a documentary?
Yeah, let's call it a documentary series. And on each episode, they take about 3 or 4 strange deaths. Always strange. Always out of the ordinary. Mm-hmm. And it's weird how they do it, because there's the danger that people will be very upset, molesto. What they do is very particular. They always take care to report the death of somebody who has not been very nice. So it's very weird, I know, but it's always like a criminal or something like that who dies while trying to commit a crime, or somebody who was just very, very unpleasant, and they die in a weird way. So they kind of try and justify the fact that they're talking about this person's death. They don't make fun of, perfectly normal people, so to speak, who've died. So it's kind of weird. It's a sensitive issue. I guess you could say, well, you shouldn't be looking at anybody's strange deaths. But as I say, they always pick like kind of very unpleasant or kind of criminal people. They change the name and they talk about the death. It sounds weird, but you kind of end up laughing. You shouldn't really laugh about death, I guess, but some of the deaths are so weird that you just think, wow, how on earth did that happen?
And do you hear this kind of vocabulary of forensic science in the episodes?
Yes, there's always kind of the background information, then a description of the weird death, and then a couple of minutes of kind of forensic detail, like how exactly did this person die? So, for example, the type of thing like, this person accidentally sat on a knife, or something like that, which went up the rectal passage, opened it from inside. This would have caused massive bleeding out of the anus, etc. So it's always kind of some really gruesome, that's like horrible, but strange and improbable death like that. And they describe a little bit the technicality behind it, yeah.
Okay, definitely put that in the show notes as well if you're interested. Reza, have you ever had your fingerprints taken?
Yes, and I imagine you have as well, to live in Spain years ago.
I think so. Was it when we got the residencia permission, we had to give our fingerprints to the police?
That's right. I think a long time ago, but yep, you get your fingerprints taken. So to take someone's fingerprints.
And when you go into the US now, you have an electronic fingerprint reader. So years ago, you used to put your finger and thumbs in ink and then press them on the paper. Now it's electronically.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be highly effective. Yeah. Selling machine guns to mentally disturbed people, there's no danger in that whatsoever. But taking everybody's fingerprints, I'm sure that'll work. That'll keep the country safe.
They're tracking us. They're watching us. What do you think is the most effective way to kill someone? How would you commit the perfect murder?
Well, I've never wanted to kill someone. Well, I don't know. Or
maybe one or two students in the past.
Have I wanted to kill someone? Well, funnily enough, you know my famous reforma doing up the house? It's now actually happening. And I have had a couple of arguments with a good friend of mine. And I guess the idea of killing her has crossed my mind, but only quickly. Quickly. I wasn't really serious about it. But I must admit, I haven't dreamt up any strange way of doing it. Have you?
Not dreamt up, but I was reading and doing some research for this, that one way, and it sounds very unlikely to me, is to dry apple seeds and then grind them up, because apparently, and I don't know if this is true, apple seeds contain cyanide.
Oh, I knew they contained some type of poison. I'd heard that.
And if you have enough and it's a powder and you mix it in, that could kill somebody. That sounds very strange to me. But I would think that definitely poisoning is the way to go. And I don't know if we should be speculating on this. We definitely don't recommend you murder anybody. But perhaps slow poisoning would be one way to do it. I don't know.
That's kind of, poisoning is kind of the classic cliche, isn't it, in murder mystery films or TV dramas. of the frustrated or the badly treated wife. It's the classic one, isn't it? So her husband thinks that there's no problem, but slowly every day she's giving him a little bit of poison. So he doesn't notice day by day, but after a year, just suddenly then he has a heart attack and dies. It's kind of the classic, isn't it?
Yeah, I've seen that in films. What would be for you the most horrible way to die, in your opinion?
I think being burnt. A lot of doctors say, yeah, particularly if it's slow. If it's quick, horrible, but consider yourself lucky.
You mean if there was a fire in the building and you couldn't escape from the building and you were burned to death?
The best thing is for that fire to be really intense and you die quick. Mm-hmm. You really don't want to be burnt slowly. That is excruciatingly painful, apparently. Because every second until you die, you're in extreme pain. I really wouldn't like that at all.
I think torture would be slow pain, or also maybe dying alone. If you were dying alone, I think that would be quite depressing.
Oh, yeah, there's an idea. I guess if you have to die, better to be surrounded by people you love, I guess.
Yeah, loved ones, we could say. Loved ones are people who love you and you love them, so they are loved ones. To be surrounded by loved ones would probably be the best way to die. Anyway, to end on a high note...
We feel a bit down after that. It's a slightly macabre episode, isn't it?
It is, but that's forensic science. We hope that's helped you, and anybody else interested in this sort of thing. It's your turn now to practice your English. What do you think is the perfect murder? What's the best way to kill someone?
And please, can we say that we're only speculating here? We don't want anybody to put it into practice. I can't imagine the legal trouble we'd get into.
The only reason we're asking is so that you can practice the vocabulary that we've introduced in this lesson.
Yeah. Don't practice killing anybody. Just practice the vocabulary.
You can send us a voice message on speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast, or send us an email with a comment or question to me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com.
Or belfastreza@gmail.com.
And before we go, we'd like to thank all our wonderful Patreons who are supporting the podcast. You can see all of their names on our website. Special thanks to Bruno, our gold sponsor, who offers walking tours of the wonderful city of Copenhagen in English or in Spanish. To find out more, go to copenhagenwalkingtour.com. Bruno also has a tour of the favela area of Rio de Janeiro. To find out more, go to favelawalkingtour.com.br. And those guides around the favela are very safe and they help the community to improve their daily needs.
Maybe you'd like to join our Patreon program. You can for just $1 a month. You can sponsor us and get instant access to recent audio transcriptions, lovingly transcribed by Angelica Bello. Just have a look at Patreon. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Inglespodcast for details.
And apart from Bruno and a long list of lovely supporters on our website, we have 12 new Patreon subscribers this month. They are Fernando Antonio de Paula Andrade, Santiago Diaz de Rivera, Alberto B.O., Alejandra Coni, Victor Vaquero, Luis Sanz Ruiz, Ronald Jesus Espinosa Mora, Andrés Herrera, Alirio Antonio Moreno Medina, Eduardo Hilario, Jose Aristizabal, and Armando. Thank you to all of you for supporting us. What's next week, Reza?
On next week's episode, we have international business.
Until then, thank you very much for listening this week. It's goodbye from Reza.
And bye-bye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.